The moon hung low over the jagged peaks of the Sierra Madre, casting silvery shadows across the ancient forests of northern Mexico. In the heart of this wild expanse, hidden from human eyes, lay the territory of the Lupus Pack, the most powerful werewolf clan in the region. Their alpha, King Harlan Voss, ruled with an iron fist wrapped in fur, his presence a force that commanded respect and fear in equal measure. At 35, Harlan was a towering figure of raw power, his dark hair streaked with the silver of battles won, his golden eyes sharp enough to pierce the night. He had built his pack from the ashes of old rivalries, forging alliances through strength and cunning, but lately whispers of unrest stirred the winds. Trespassers had been sighted near the borders, and Harlan's instincts told him something darker was afoot. It was a humid evening in late summer when Harlan returned to his den, the massive cavern carved into the mountainside that served as the pack's heart. The air was thick with the scent of pine and earth, mingled with the faint metallic tang that made his wolf senses prickle. He'd spent the day patrolling the southern ridges, chasing off a band of rogue shifters who dared encroach on Lupus lands. His muscles ached from the hunt, but satisfaction burned in his chest, another threat neutralized. As he shifted back to human form at the den's entrance, shrugging on a simple leather jacket over his broad frame, he paused. The guards, Marco and Lena, stood at their posts, but their faces were drawn, eyes darting nervously. "Report!" Harlan growled, his voice a low rumble that echoed off the stone walls. Marco, a wiry beta with a scar across his cheek from a long-ago skirmish, stepped forward hesitantly. He was loyal, but tonight his usual bravado was absent. "Alpha, we found something inside, tracks that don't belong, smells like blood and fear. We didn't go in, waited for you." Harlan's jaw tightened. Trespassers in his den? Unthinkable. The cavern was sacred, warded by ancient runes and patrolled relentlessly. He pushed past them, his boots crunching on the gravel-strewn floor as he descended the torch-lit tunnel. The air grew cooler, heavier, and that metallic scent intensified, twisting his gut. What kind of fool or desperate soul would invade the Alpha's lair? Deeper in, the main chamber opened up, a vast space adorned with furs, weapons, and the glowing embers of a central fire pit. Harlan's eyes scanned the shadows, landing on a pile of ragged blankets in the corner near the healing herbs. A low whimper cut through the silence, followed by the soft rustle of movement. His heart thudded, not with fear, but with a primal surge of protectiveness that surprised even him. He approached slowly, senses on high alert. There, huddled against the cold stone, was a woman, no, an Omega. She was bleeding, her simple cotton dress torn and soaked at the shoulder, her pale skin smeared with dirt and crimson. Her hair, a tangled cascade of chestnut waves, fell over her face as she clutched something close to her chest. But it wasn't just her. Around her, like a fragile fortress of fur and wide eyes, 7 small pups whimpered and shifted restlessly. They were all Omegas too, by the soft, vulnerable scent clinging to them, tiny wolves in human form, ranging from toddlers to preteens, their faces streaked with tears and exhaustion. The oldest, a girl of about 10 with fierce green eyes, bared her tiny fangs at Harlan, positioning herself protectively in front of the others. "Who are you?" Harlan demanded, his voice softer than he intended, though it still carried the weight of command. The Omega woman lifted her head, her blue eyes wide with terror and defiance. She was young, perhaps mid-20s, with delicate features that spoke of hardship rather than fragility. Her name, he would later learn, was Ilara, but in that moment she was a ghost in his den. A bleeding stranger with a litter of pups who looked half-starved and hunted. Ilara's breath came in ragged gasps. "Please, don't hurt them," she whispered, her voice trembling but unbroken. One of the pups, a boy no older than 5, with matted blonde curls, clung to her leg, his small body shaking. The others huddled closer, their sense a chaotic mix of fear and the faint, innocent wildness of young wolves. Harlan's mind raced. Omegas like this didn't just appear in alpha territories. They were rare, cherished or exploited depending on the pack. And 7, that was unheard of, a miracle or a curse. But the blood, it trailed from her wound, fresh and deep, as if inflicted by claws or teeth. He knelt slowly, keeping his distance to avoid startling them further. The den's firelight flickered across her face, highlighting the bruise blooming on her cheek. "How did you get here? Who did this to you?" Harlan's tone was steady, but inside, questions swirled like a storm. His pack's borders were impenetrable. Someone had helped them breach them, or they'd evaded detection through sheer desperation. The pup's eyes, some golden, some hazel, watched him warily, their tiny forms a heartbreaking reminder of the vulnerabilities he protected his own pack from. Ilara hesitated, glancing at the entrance as if expecting pursuers. We ran. From the Shadow Claws. They took everything. My mate. He's gone. They want the pups for their rituals." Her words hung in the air, heavy with unspoken horrors. The Shadow Claws, a rival pack from the eastern valleys, known for their brutal ways and Omega trafficking. Rumors had reached Harlan's ears, but this, invading his sanctuary with a bleeding Omega and her brood, it reeked of a larger scheme. Harlan's wolf snarled within him, urging action. Protect the pack. But these intruders weren't threats. They were victims, crashing into his world like a tidal wave. He reached out a hand, not to grab, but to offer. "You're safe here, for now." The oldest pup, the girl named Mira, snarled again, but Ilara placed a shaky hand on her shoulder, silencing her. As Harlan called for Lena to fetch the pack healer, old Thomas, a grizzled veteran with a limp from a border war and a gentle touch with the wounded, he couldn't shake the feeling that this intrusion was no accident. The air hummed with unspoken danger, the pup's whimpers echoing like a warning. What had driven this Omega to risk everything in his den, and what revenge or redemption would follow? Outside, the wind howled through the pines, carrying distant howls that made Harlan's ears twitch. The night was young, and secrets were just beginning to unravel. Ilara's eyes met his, a spark of hope flickering amid the pain. Little did he know, this bleeding stranger and her 7 pups would ignite a fire that would reshape the Lupus pack and his own guarded heart forever. Hey, before we dive deeper into what Harlan does next, what do you think? Would you trust a stranger like him in a moment like that? Drop your thoughts in the comments. And if this hook has you curious, smash that like button and subscribe for more twists in the tale. Where are you watching from, and what's your name? Let me know. Tomas shuffled into the chamber with the urgency of a man who'd seen too many wounds but never grown numb to them. The old healer's hands, calloused from years of mixing poultices and binding gashes, trembled slightly as he set down his satchel of herbs and bandages by the fire pit. His grey beard was streaked with the same silver as Harlan's hair, and his one good eye, the other milky from a long-ago poison arrow, scanned the scene with quiet assessment. Lena hovered behind him, her sharp features etched with concern. She was the pack's swiftest scout, a beta with a no-nonsense ponytail and a knife always at her belt, but even she softened at the sight of the pups. "Alpha," Thomas murmured, kneeling beside Ilara without waiting for permission. His voice was gravelly, laced with the faint lilt of the mountain folk from deeper in the Sierra Madre. "This one's bad. Claw marks, deep, infected already if I'm not careful." He gently pried back the torn fabric of her dress, revealing jagged wounds that wept blood down her arm. Ilara winced but didn't pull away, her body rigid as she kept one arm wrapped around the youngest pup. a tiny girl with braids like twisted vines, who buried her face in her mother's side. Harlan stood back, arms crossed over his broad chest, his golden eyes flicking between the healer and the huddled group. The den's air felt thicker now, charged with the sharp tang of medicinal yarrow and the underlying musk of fear sweat from the pups. Mira, the oldest, still eyed him like he was the predator, her small fists clenched as if ready to shift and fight. The others shifted restlessly. A boy with freckles named Rio, about 7, whispered something to his sister beside him, while the twins, Luca and Leah, no more than 3, clung to each other's hands, their wide eyes reflecting the fire's glow like little moons. "Tell me everything," Harlan said, his tone low and steady, like the rumble of thunder over the pines. He lowered himself to sit on a nearby fur rug, giving them space, but closing the circle just enough to make it feel like sanctuary rather than interrogation. Outside, the wind picked up, rattling loose stones in the cavern walls, as if the mountains themselves were listening. Ilara's gaze dropped to the floor, her chestnut hair falling like a curtain. She took a shaky breath, the words spilling out in fragments, raw and edged with the pain of memory. "It started in the valleys near Chihuahua. My pack, we were small, peaceful. Omegas like us, we kept to the old ways, herding goats by day, shifting under the full moon to sing to the ancestors." Her voice cracked, and she stroked the head of the pup on her lap, a boy named Mateo with curls that bounced like spring grass. But the Shadow Claws came last harvest, led by their alpha, Victor, a brute with eyes like coals. They burned our homes, took the strong ones for labor. My mate Joran, he fought. They dragged him away, said he'd make a fine warrior slave. The pups whimpered at the name, a collective shiver rippling through them. Harlan's jaw clenched. He'd heard tales of Victor, a rogue who'd clawed his way to power by selling Omegas to the highest bidder, even across the border to human traffickers who didn't know or care what they dealt with. But 7 pups? That was a prize that could tip balances in the shifter world, used for breeding lines or worse, those dark rituals whispered about in border taverns, blood rites to summon old spirits for power. "We hid in the arroyos for weeks," Ilara continued, her blue eyes lifting to meet Harlan's for the first time without flinching. "There was fire there, banked but burning. Starved but alive. Then scouts found us. I fought, clawed one across the face before they pinned me. That's how—" She gestured weakly to her shoulder. "The pups scattered when the fighting started. Mira led them north, through the canyons. I thought we'd lost them forever until we stumbled on your borders at dusk. The runes, they burned, but desperation pushed us through. Please, Alpha, they're all I have left." Thomas worked methodically, grinding herbs into a paste with a stone mortar, the scent of sage and comfrey filling the air like a balm against the tension. "Hold still, Nina," he said softly to Ilara, applying the mixture with gentle fingers. "This'll sting, but it'll knit you back." Lena distributed strips of dried meat and water skins to the pups, her movements careful, like approaching wild foals. Rio snatched his share first, tearing into it with the ferocity of hunger, while Mira distributed the rest, her green eyes never leaving Harlan. Harlan nodded slowly, processing the flood of it all. His pack was strong, but taking in outsiders, especially Omegas with a target on their backs, could invite war. The Shadow Claws wouldn't stop at the borders. Victor's greed was legendary, fueled by rumors of ancient artifacts hidden in the Sierra Madre that could amplify an alpha's power. Yet, looking at these broken souls in his den, something stirred in Harlan's chest, a pull deeper than duty, like the moon calling to the tide. His wolf whined within, urging him to claim them as his to protect. "You're under my roof now," he said finally, his voice resonating off the stone like a vow. "No one touches you here without going through me." The words hung heavy, and for a moment the chamber fell silent, save for the crackle of the fire. Ilara's shoulders sagged in relief, but her eyes searched his, as if testing the truth of it. The pups relaxed fractionally, Leah even crawled forward to touch Thomas's beard, giggling at the tickle. But peace was fleeting. Marco burst into the chamber then, his scarred face flushed, breath coming in huffs from a run. Alpha! Border Patrol sighted movement. 3 scouts, shadow claws sent. They're circling the eastern ridge, sniffing for tracks. Harlan rose in one fluid motion, his body coiling like a spring. The den's warmth turned sharp, the air humming with impending storm. Ilara's hand tightened on Mateo's, her face paling anew. "They followed us," she whispered, horror dawning. Mira stood, tiny but fierce, positioning herself between her mother and the entrance. Harlan's golden eyes hardened, a growl building in his throat. "Lena, get the pups to the inner sanctum. Bar the doors. Thomas, stay with Ilara." He turned to Marco, clapping a hand on his shoulder. "Rally the betas. We meet them head on." As the group scattered, the pups' soft cries echoed, pulling at something raw in Harlan. This wasn't just defense anymore. It was personal. The Shadow Claws had invaded his territory, his den, and now threatened what he'd just sworn to shield. Outside, the moon climbed higher, bathing the forest in silver, while distant howls pierced the night. Hunters closing in. Harlan shifted as he emerged into the cool mountain air, his massive wolf form rippling with muscle under midnight fur. The chase was on, but in his heart, he knew this was only the beginning. What secrets did Ilara still hold, and how far would he go to keep his promise? Hey, imagine you're Harlan right now, facing down those scouts with your pack's future on the line. Would you fight or negotiate? Tell me in the comments, and if you're hooked on this unfolding drama, hit that like and subscribe for the next chapter's action. Where are you tuning in from, friend? What's your take on Ilara's strength? Harlan's paws pounded the earth as he crested the eastern ridge, the scent of intruders burning his nostrils like acrid smoke. The Sierra Madre's night air was alive with the rustle of pine needles and the distant call of an owl, but beneath it all lurked the foul tang of shadow claws, musk heavy with aggression and the rot of unwashed fur. Marco flanked him on the left, his lean wolf form a shadow darting through the underbrush, while 2 other betas, rugged fighters named Jax and Sophia, brought up the rear. Jax was a stocky male with a perpetual snarl, his coat brindled like fallen leaves, scarred from too many brawls in the pack's training grounds. Sophia, wiry and quick, had a white blaze on her muzzle that glowed under the moonlight. She was Harlan's best tracker, her nose twitching as she picked up the trail. The scouts were bold. Harlan had to give them that. 3 of them weaving through the boulders like ghosts, their howls muffled but probing. He could picture Victor back in his valley lair, a hulking alpha with a mane like tangled thorns and a laugh that echoed like breaking bones. But these weren't Victor's elite. They were fodder, sent to test the borders and sniff out the prize. Harlan's golden eyes narrowed, his massive frame low to the ground, as he signaled a halt behind a cluster of ancient oaks. The wind shifted, carrying their scents directly to him. One young and cocky, another seasoned with the bitterness of old wounds, and the third, female, sharp and cunning. A low growl rumbled from Harlan's chest, vibrating through the pack link, a silent command to spread out. Marco veered left, circling wide, while Jax and Sophia fanned right. Harlan held the center, his heart a steady drumbeat of fury. Back in the den, Ilara's words echoed in his mind. They want the pups for their rituals. Rituals. The word twisted like a knife. He'd dismissed the rumors as border tales, stories of shadow claws sacrificing young omegas to some forgotten deity for strength against rivals. But now, with 7 fragile lives huddled in his sanctum, it felt all too real. Ilara's blue eyes, fierce despite the pain, had locked onto his when he made his vow. He wouldn't break it, not for anything. The first scout broke into view, a lanky grey wolf with notched ears, leaping onto a fallen log to survey the ridge. He froze, nostrils flaring as Harlan's scent hit him. Before the intruder could bolt, Harlan lunged, his jaws snapping shut inches from the wolf's hind leg. The scout yelped, twisting mid-air to counter, but Marco was there, slamming into his side with a clash of fangs and fur. They tumbled down the slope in a whirlwind of snarls, leaves exploding around them like gunfire. Harlan didn't pause. He bounded forward, eyes locked on the second scout, a burly, black-furred male emerging from the shadows, hackles raised. The fight erupted in chaos. The black wolf charged Harlan head-on, aiming for his throat with reckless abandon. Harlan sidestepped, his claws raking the intruder's flank, drawing a spray of blood that sizzled on the cool earth. Pain flared in Harlan's shoulder as the wolf's teeth grazed him, but he countered with a powerful swipe that sent his opponent sprawling into a thicket of brambles. Jax joined the fray, pinning the downed scout with his weight, while Sophia pursued the third, the female, who darted like a fox through the trees, her yips calling for retreat. Harlan's breath came in hot bursts, adrenaline surging through his veins. This wasn't just a skirmish, it was a declaration. The shadow claws had crossed into Lupus territory, drawn by Elara and her pups like moths to flame. As he shook off the bite's sting, shifting back to human form for better control, he grabbed a low branch to steady himself. His leather jacket was torn, blood trickling warm down his arm, but the wound was shallow, nothing compared to what Elara had endured. "Yield!" he roared, his voice booming across the ridge, laced with alpha command that made the air thrum. The female scout skidded to a halt at the edge of a sheer drop, her wolf eyes wide with calculation. She shifted too, rising on two legs, a lean woman in her late 20s, with cropped dark hair and tattoos snaking up her arms like thorny vines. Her name, he'd learn later from pack interrogations, was Nadia, Victor's sly enforcer, known for her silver tongue and poisoned blades. "We mean no war, Alpha Voss," she said, hands raised but voice steady, edged with mockery. "Just reclaiming what's ours. That Omega bitch and her whelps, their Shadow Claw's property. Hand them over and we walk." Harlan's laugh was cold, devoid of humor. He stepped closer, towering over her, his presence a wall of unyielding muscle. "Property? In my lands? You've got balls, I'll give you that. But touch them, and I'll bury your whole pack under these mountains." Behind him, Marco dragged the lanky scout forward, bound in vines, while Jax held the burly one at bay. The air reeked of sweat and blood, the forest holding its breath. Nadia's eyes flicked to her captured comrades, then back to Harlan, a sly smile curling her lips. "Victor's not one to forget debts. Those pups, they're special. Born under the blood moon, marked for the rites. You keep them. You invite the darkness." Her words hung like a curse, stirring unease in Harlan's gut. Blood moon. Elara hadn't mentioned that. The pups' innocent faces flashed in his mind. Mira's defiance, Mateo's curls, the twins' tiny hands. Special or not, they were under his protection now. Before he could press her, a sharp crack echoed from the den's direction. A warning howl from Lena cut short. Harlan's blood ran cold. "Take them," he snarled to Marco and Jax. "Lock them in the holding caves. Sophia, with me, back to the den." Nadia laughed as they bound her, but her eyes promised retribution. They raced through the night, the moon mocking them from above. Harlan's mind raced faster. Had Elara lied? Or was there more to her flight than she'd shared? Bursting into the cavern, he found chaos. The inner sanctum's door splintered. Thomas slumped against the wall with a gash on his forehead, his milky eye dazed. Lena stood guard, knife drawn, over Elara and the pups, who were herded into a tight circle. No intruders, but the air stank of fresh intrusion. "Tracks!" Lena panted, her ponytail disheveled. "One got past us, slipped in while we were distracted. Didn't take anything, but left this." She held out a scrap of black cloth, embroidered with the Shadow Claw's claw mark insignia, smeared with blood that wasn't Elara's. Elara clutched Mira close, her healed shoulder tense under the bandages. "They know we're here," she whispered, her voice breaking for the first time, revealing the raw fear beneath her strength. The pups whimpered, Rio burying his face in her dress, while Leah reached out a trembling hand toward Harlan, as if seeking the protector he'd become. Harlan knelt, his hand hovering near hers before gently taking it. The touch sent a jolt through him, warm and electric, like the first spark of a bond he hadn't sought. "We'll find who it was. No more running." But as Thomas stirred, muttering about a shadow that smelled of betrayal, Harlan wondered if the threat was already inside. The pack's whispers of unrest. Could one of his own be the leak? The night deepened, secrets festering like open wounds, and Harlan knew the real battle was just igniting. What would you do if you found out betrayal was closer than you thought? Share in the comments. Would Harlan's trust in Ilara hold or crack under the pressure? If this chapter's got your pulse racing, like and subscribe for the escalating drama ahead. Where are you from, and how's the story hitting you so far? Harlan's grip on Leah's tiny hand tightened just enough to reassure her, the warmth of her small palm seeping into his calloused fingers like a fragile anchor amid the storm. The inner sanctum of the den felt smaller now, the stone walls pressing in with the weight of violation, the air thick with the acrid residue of the intruder's passage, sweat, pine sap, and something sharper, like the metallic bite of deceit. Flickering torchlight danced across the faces of the pups, casting long shadows that made their wide eyes seem even larger, pools of uncertainty reflecting the chaos. Ilara knelt beside them, her bandaged shoulder rising and falling with shallow breaths, while Mira hovered protectively, her green eyes darting to every corner as if expecting the shadows to come alive. Thomas groaned from his spot against the wall, his grizzled face paling as he pressed a cloth to the gash on his forehead. Blood trickled between his fingers, staining the grey of his beard, but his good eye sharpened with the clarity of someone who'd patched up too many betrayals in his long life. "It was quick, Alpha," he rasped, his voice like gravel underfoot. "Slipped in like a rat, didn't touch the pups but lingered near the herbs. Smelled familiar, like one of ours but twisted. Betrayal's got a scent all its own." Harlan's jaw clenched, his golden eyes narrowing as he released Leah's hand and stood, the scrap of black cloth still clutched in Lena's fist like a damning talisman. The Lupus pack had always been tight-knit, forged in the fires of the Sierra Madre's harsh winters and bloodier border wars, but whispers of discontent had been growing. Betas grumbling about Harlan's iron rule, Omegas feeling the strain of endless patrols. Could one of them have sold out to Victor? The thought gnawed at him, a low growl building in his chest that echoed off the cavern ceiling. He turned to Lena, her knife still drawn, her white-blazed fur matted from the earlier scuffle outside. "Round up the night watch. Question everyone who's been near the borders. No one sleeps until we have answers." And Lena nodded sharply, her ponytail swinging as she sheathed her blade and moved to obey, her steps purposeful despite the exhaustion etching lines around her eyes. She was the pack's backbone, a beta who'd lost her own litter to a rogue attack years ago, her loyalty as unyielding as the mountain rock. As she slipped out, the pup stirred, Rio wiping his freckled nose on his sleeve while the twins, Luca and Matteo, huddled closer to Ilara, their small bodies trembling like leaves in the wind. Mira stepped forward, her voice a fierce whisper that cut through the tension. "You promised, Alpha, no more running, but if your pack's turning on us—" Harlan met her gaze, seeing the echo of Ilara's fire in the girl's defiant stance. At 10, she was already a little warrior, her tangled hair framing a face that had seen too much loss. "I keep my promises," he said, his tone softening just for her, a rare crack in his alpha armor. "But trust is earned. Yours, mine, everyone's." He glanced at Ilara, who rose slowly, wincing as she gathered the youngest pups. Her blue eyes held his, a silent plea mingled with gratitude, and for a moment the den's chill faded under the spark of something unspoken, a bond forming in the crucible of crisis. "Let's get them settled," Harlan murmured, gesturing to a side alcove lined with soft furs and glowing quartz lanterns, a nursery area rarely used since the pack's last litter had grown. Ilara nodded, herding the children with gentle murmurs in the old tongue, words like lullabies that soothed their whimpers. As they moved, Harlan caught snippets, tales of starry nights in the valleys, of Joran's strong arms lifting them high. The pups settled in, curling together like a pile of warm stones, but sleep evaded them. Leah's tiny hand reached out again, brushing Harlan's knee as if testing his solidity. Outside, the night deepened, the moon's silver light filtering through cracks in the cavern roof like watchful eyes. Harlan paced the main chamber, his mind a whirlwind of strategy. The captured scouts, Nadia and her packmates, were secured in the holding caves, dank tunnels warded with iron bars and runic seals, guarded by Jax's unblinking vigilance. But words from Nadia's sly mouth lingered. Born under the blood moon, marked for the rites. He needed answers from Ilara, but pushing her now might shatter the fragile trust. Instead, he sent Marco to interrogate the prisoners, the wiry beta's scarred cheek twisting in anticipation of the task. Hours blurred as Lena returned with reports. Alibis checked, scents catalogued, but no clear traitor emerged. The pack's elders, like wise old Rosa with her braided white hair and stories of ancient pacts, gathered in the fire pit's glow, their faces lined with worry. Rosa, the den's keeper of law, clutched a carved staff topped with a wolf's head, her voice steady as she advised, "The Shadow Claws seek the old power, Alpha. Those pups, if they're blood moon born, their essence could fuel rituals to shatter packs like ours. But Omegas carry the moon's grace too. Protect them, and it might bind stronger than any claw." Harlan absorbed her words, the fire's crackle mirroring the turmoil in his chest. He'd always led with strength, but this pulled at deeper instincts, the Alpha's drive to nurture, to build a legacy beyond battles. As dawn's first light crept in, painting the cavern in soft greys, Ilara emerged from the alcove, the pups finally dozing under her watchful eye. She approached him hesitantly, her dress mended with rough stitches, the bruise on her cheek fading to a shadow. "The blood moon," she said quietly, as if reading his thoughts. It was the night they came. Joran said it marked them as blessed, not cursed. But Victor, he twists blessings into chains. Harlan studied her, the vulnerability in her posture contrasting the steel in her voice. Up close, her scent, wildflowers crushed underfoot, mingled with the pup's innocent milk and earth aroma, stirred his wolf, a protective rumble rising unbidden. "Why us? Why my den?" he asked, not accusing, but probing the layers of her flight. Ilara's eyes dropped, then lifted with resolve. "Rumors. Your pack's strength, the runes that ward deeper than most. We followed a trail, old smuggler's path through the canyons. I didn't know it'd lead here, but fate, maybe." Her hand brushed his arm accidentally, sending that electric jolt again, warmer this time, like embers catching. Before he could respond, a sharp howl split the air, Marco's signal from the holding caves. Harlan's body tensed, instincts flaring. "Stay here," he told Ilara, but she shook her head, Mira appearing at her side like a shadow. "We're in this together now." They moved as one, Harlan leading through torch-lit tunnels that wound like veins through the mountain. The holding caves reeked of damp stone and fear, iron bars glinting in the low light. Jax stood guard, his brindled fur bristling, while Marco paced, his scar livid. "One talked, Alpha," Marco said, jerking a thumb at the lanky scout, bound and bruised in the corner. "Nadia's the key. Victor's got a mole. Someone in your pack fed them the border weak spots. And the pups? They're not just any omegas. The rites. It's to summon the Shadow Mother, an old spirit. Control her. Control the Sierra Madre's packs. Harlan's blood boiled, his fist slamming against the bars with a clang that echoed like thunder. Nadia smirked from her cell, her tattooed arms crossed. "Tick-tock, Voss. Victor's marching at full moon. Hand over the litter, or watch your precious den burn." Rage and resolve warred in Harlan as he turned back, Ilara's face pale but unyielding beside him. The betrayal cut deep, fracturing the pack's unity, but in her eyes he saw a mirror, a chance to rebuild stronger. As they returned to the main chamber, the pups stirring awake with hopeful whines, Harlan made a silent vow. No more hiding. The Lupus pack would rise, forged anew in this fire, with Ilara and her 7 at its heart. But as the first rays pierced the cavern, a distant rumble shook the ground. Hoofbeats, or something worse. Harlan's golden eyes scanned the horizon through the entrance, the Sierra Madre whispering warnings on the wind. "Hey, if you were Ilara, would you reveal everything to Harlan right away or hold back to protect the pups? Drop your thoughts in the comments. What's your guess on the traitor? If this chapter's twisting your gut with suspense, smash that like and subscribe for the revelations coming next. Where are you watching from, and how's the pack drama pulling you in? The rumble grew into a thunderous echo, vibrating through the cavern floor like the heartbeat of the mountain itself awakening. Harlan froze at the den's entrance, his broad frame silhouetted against the dawn's pale light, filtering through the pines. The Sierra Madre stretched out before him, its jagged peaks shrouded in mist, but his heightened senses cut through the haze. The distant thud wasn't hooves but paws, dozens of them pounding the earth in unison, carrying the unmistakable reek of Shadow Claw's aggression on the wind. Victor's full force, earlier than expected. His golden eyes flashed with predatory focus as he turned back to the main chamber, where Ilara stood with Mira at her side, the girl's small hand gripping her mother's dress like a lifeline. "They're coming," Harlan said, his voice a low growl that sent the pups stirring in their alcove. The younger ones blinked awake, confusion etching their sleepy faces, Rio rubbing his freckled eyes, the twins Luca and Leah clutching each other's arms, Matteo yawning with a whine that tugged at Harlan's chest. Ilara's blue eyes widened, but she didn't falter. Instead, she scooped up Leah, her bandaged shoulder protesting with a wince she hid from the children. "How many?" she asked, her tone steady, laced with the quiet resolve of someone who'd already lost everything once. Harlan's mind raced, piecing together the fragments from the interrogation. Nadia's taunts about the mole rang true now. The Shadow Claws knew the weak points, the hidden trails through the canyons. He glanced at Thomas, who was binding his head wound with fresh cloth, the old healer's milky eye unseeing, but his instincts sharp. "Enough to overrun us if we're not smart," Harlan replied, striding to the central fire pit where embers still glowed, casting warm flickers across the stone walls, adorned with ancient carvings of howling wolves. Rosa lingered nearby, her white braids swaying as she leaned on her staff, the wolf head carvings seeming to snarl in warning. "We fortify!" Harlan commanded, his alpha presence filling the space like a tangible force, steadying the air thick with fear. "Lena, take the pups and Ilara to the upper tunnels, the ones with the escape vents. Marco and Jax, ready the perimeter traps. Sophia, scout the ridge and report back." The betas moved like well-oiled gears, Lena's ponytail bobbing as she gathered the children with gentle efficiency, her voice a soft murmur of reassurance. "Come on, little ones. Adventure time. Let's play hide and seek with the bad wolves." The pups followed, though Mira shot Harlan a fierce look over her shoulder, her green eyes promising she'd fight if needed. Ilara hesitated, pressing a quick kiss to Matteo's curls before turning to Harlan. Up close, in the morning light, her chestnut hair caught hints of gold, and the scent of wildflowers clung to her despite the den's earthy musk. "I can help," she insisted, her voice barely above a whisper, but the determination in it stirred something deep in him, a respect that bordered on admiration and more. I'm not helpless. Joran taught me to shift mid-fight, to use the shadows. Harlan studied her, the electric pull between them humming like an unspoken promise. Her strength, forged in loss, mirrored his own, and for the first time the lone alpha felt the weight of partnership. "Stay with the pups," he said, but softer, his hand brushing her arm, intentional this time, the touch lingering a beat too long. "Protect them. That's your fight now." She nodded, a spark of understanding passing between them, before slipping away with Lena, the children's soft footsteps fading into the tunnels. Alone with Rosa and Thomas, Harlan unrolled a weathered map on the fur rug, its edges frayed from years of planning border defenses. The den's air grew heavier, laced with the sharp scent of pine smoke from the rekindled fire. Rosa traced a gnarled finger along the eastern ridge. "The Shadow Mother writes. Victor's desperation reeks of it. Those pups' blood moon birth ties them to her, a conduit for power. But your bond with the Omega, it could counter it. Old lore speaks of Alpha-Omega unions sealing fates." Harlan's wolf stirred at the words, a low rumble in his throat. Bond? The idea had flickered since Ilara's arrival, but now, with war at the gates, it felt inevitable. Thomas chuckled dryly, tying off his bandage. "Fate's a tricky bitch, Alpha. But I've seen you lead through worse. Just don't let the traitor slip the net." The traitor. Harlan's fist clenched around the map's corner. From the knight's questioning, suspicions pointed to one of the newer betas, Gale, a quiet recruit from the southern fringes with shifty eyes and a habit of vanishing on patrols. Lena had caught his scent near the intruder's tracks, faint but damning. As if summoned by the thought, Marco burst in from a side passage, dragging a bound figure. Gale, his face bruised, dark hair matted with sweat. The beta's scent was sour with guilt, mingling with the Shadow Claw's rot. "Caught him trying to bolt, Alpha," Marco snarled, shoving Gale to his knees. The traitor was young, barely 25, with a lean build scarred from what looked like self-inflicted marks, loyalty tattoos from Victor's pack hidden under ink. "Spilled it all. Victor's been paying him scraps to map our runes. Said the pups would make him rich." Harlan loomed over him, golden eyes blazing. "Why?" The word was a whip, cracking through the chamber. Gale's voice trembled, but defiance flickered. "Your pack's a cage. Victor promised freedom and power. The rights. They'll break every alpha in these mountains." He spat toward the fire, earning a cuff from Marco. Rage surged, but Harlan reined it in, his voice ice. "Lock him with the scouts. No mercy." As Marco hauled Gale away, the distant howls grew louder, vibrating the quartz lanterns until they rattled. Sophia's return howl pierced the air, signal for incoming assault, 20 strong at least, breaching the southern arroyo. Harlan shifted in a blur of muscle and fur, his massive midnight form padding to the entrance. The Sierra Madre's mist swirled like a veil, but through it he saw them. Shadow Claw's wolves, led by a hulking figure that could only be Victor, his coal-black eyes fixed on the den like a hunter scenting prey. The Alpha's roar shook the pines, a challenge that Harlan answered with his own deep and resonant, calling the pack to arms. Back in the tunnels, Ilara felt the echo in her bones, holding the pups close as Lena barred the heavy oak door. Mira pressed against her, whispering, "Will the big Alpha win, Mama?" Ilara's heart ached, but she smiled through the fear. "He will, for us." The bond tugged at her, a warmth blooming in her chest, pulling her toward Harlan even as the battle raged outside. The clash began at the ridge's base, fur and fangs meeting in a frenzy of snarls and blood. Harlan tore into the front line, his claws rending a scout's flank, while Jax and Sophia flanked him, their forms a whirlwind of defense. Victor's pack pressed hard, driven by greed for the pup's gift, But Harlan's Lupus warriors fought with renewed fire, their alpha's vow fueling every strike. Yet as the sun climbed, a shadow slipped through the chaos, another infiltrator, aiming for the tunnels. Ilara sensed it first, her Omega instincts flaring. "Mira, stay with the little ones," she breathed, shifting into her sleek wolf form, silver-grey fur rippling over her frame. She lunged at the door, just as claws scraped the wood, her jaws clamping on intruding paws. The fight spilled into the passage, Ilara's growls mingling with the pup's cries. She fought like a tempest, protecting her brood with a ferocity that surprised even her. Outside, Harlan felt the pull sharpen, a mate's link igniting, urging him toward the den. He broke free from Victor's grip, racing back, bloodied but unbroken. Bursting into the tunnels, he found Ilara pinning the intruder, a wiry Shadowclaw's female, her eyes wide with shock. Harlan ended it swiftly, his presence a shield as Ilara shifted back, panting, her dress torn anew. The pups rushed to her, but Leah toddled to Harlan, hugging his leg. "You came," she whispered. He knelt, the battle's roar fading to a Lupus victory howl outside. "Always." In that moment, with Ilara's gaze meeting his, the pack's future shifted, forged in blood, bound by something deeper than loyalty. But Victor's retreat howl promised return, and the Shadow Mother's shadow loomed larger. The war was far from over. "Hey! Picture yourself in Ilara's paws, fighting off an intruder to save your pups. Would you risk it all like that, or play it safe? Share in the comments. What's your bet on Harlan and Ilara's bond sealing the pack's fate? If this chapter's got you on the edge, like and subscribe for the full moon showdown ahead. Where are you from, and how's the tension building for you? The victory howl still echoed through the Sierra Madre's canyons as Harlan shifted back to human form in the dim tunnel, his chest heaving from the sprint and the kill. Blood streaked his bare torso, mixing with sweat that glistened under the quartz lantern's soft glow. But the wound on his shoulder from the earlier skirmish throbbed less now, adrenaline's gift. Ilara stood before him, her silver-grey wolf form melting away to reveal her human shape, torn dress clinging to her curves like a second skin, her chestnut hair wild and matted. Her blue eyes locked onto his, fierce and vulnerable, the air between them crackling with the raw energy of the mate bond that had just ignited, pulling them like invisible threads. The pups clustered around her legs, their small faces a mix of awe and relief. Rio's freckles standing out against flushed cheeks, the twins, Luca and Leah, peeking from behind Mateo's curls, while Mira crossed her arms, trying to look tough despite the tremble in her stance. The intruder's body lay slumped against the tunnel wall, a wiry female with Shadowclaw's markings tattooed into her fur-tufted skin, her eyes glassy in death. Lena burst in moments later, knife in hand, her ponytail askew and white-blazed fur still half-shifted on her arms. "Alpha, the ridge is clear. Victor's pulling back, but he's not done, left half his pack bleeding in the dirt." Harlan nodded, his golden eyes never leaving Ilara as he stepped closer. The scent of her, wildflowers and fresh earth, overpowering the metallic tang of blood. "You fought like a queen," he murmured, his voice rough but laced with admiration, reaching out to steady her as she swayed slightly from exhaustion. Her hand caught his forearm, the touch sending sparks through them both, warm and undeniable. For a heartbeat, the world narrowed to just that connection, the pups' soft whimpers fading into the background hum of the den's stone heart. But reality crashed back like a wave. Thomas shuffled in from the main chamber, his limp more pronounced, fresh bandages wrapped around his head like a crown of white. The old healer's good eye twinkled with knowing as he took in the scene, his gravelly chuckle cutting the tension. "Bond set, eh? Moon's work, that. Now let's patch you up before Victor licks his wounds and comes howling again." He gestured to Ilara's new scratches, shallow but stinging across her ribs, and Harlan helped her to a nearby stone bench, carved smooth by generations of pack hands. As Thomas worked, grinding more comfrey paste with his mortar, the group settled into the alcove's warmth. The upper tunnels smelled of damp moss and hidden springs, a safe haven with narrow vents that whispered cool breezes from the peaks. Rosa joined them, her white braids swaying as she carried a tray of steaming herbal tea, the steam curling like spirits in the lantern light. The pack's lawkeeper had a grandmotherly softness, her lined face etched with stories of bonds that toppled empires, but her grip on the staff was iron. "The shadow mother's shadow grows," she warned softly, handing mugs to the pups, who sipped tentatively, the warmth chasing the chill from their bones. "Victor's rights need those blood moon pups to call her fully, but with the bond—" She trailed off, glancing between Harlan and Ilara, a sly smile creasing her lips. Ilara accepted the mug, her fingers brushing Harlan's again as he sat beside her, close enough that their thighs touched. The pups sprawled on the furs, exhaustion claiming them one by one. Mira finally leaning against her mother's side, her green eyes fluttering shut. "The bond," Ilara echoed, her voice a whisper that carried the weight of revelation. "I felt it when you came, like the moon pulling the tide. Joran, he was my mate, but this is different, stronger." Her words hung heavy, stirring a flicker of jealousy in Harlan that he quickly quashed. Loss had marked her, just as battles had marked him. Harlan's hand found hers fully now, intertwining their fingers, the calluses on his palm rough against her softer skin. "It changes everything," he admitted, his alpha instincts surging with purpose. The den had always been his fortress, but now it pulsed with new life. These 7 pups, this Omega who'd crashed into his world bleeding and defiant. Outside, the Sierra Madre stirred with the day's heat, birds calling from the pines as if mocking the violence below. But Marco's report via Packlink buzzed in Harlan's mind. The captured scouts, including Nadia, were singing now under pressure, spilling Victor's plans. A full assault at the next full moon, using the mole's maps to strike the heart. "We root out the rot," Harlan said, his tone brooking no argument. "Oh." Gale's betrayal burned fresh, the young beta rotted in the holding caves, but doubts lingered. Who else might be tainted? Lena paced the tunnel mouth, her knife twirling idly, her sharp features set in grim determination. "I'll sniff every corner, Alpha. No more surprises." Jax lumbered in behind her, his stocky frame filling the space, brindled hair still flecked with enemy blood. "Perimeters reinforced, traps set with silver-laced vines. But Victor's got numbers. We need allies." The word hung like a challenge. Harlan's pack was mighty, but isolated by choice. Old wounds from rival clans kept bridges burned. Yet, with the bond solidifying, ideas sparked, reaching out to the coastal packs or the nomadic rogues who'd owe him favors from border saves. Ilara squeezed his hand, her blue eyes steady. "The Pups' songs, old Omega chants from my valley. They can strengthen the runes, bind the pack tighter." Mira stirred at that, murmuring in her sleep about starry nights, and Harlan felt the pull deepen, a family forming in the fire's forge. As the sun climbed higher, casting golden shafts through the vents, peace settled fragilely. Thomas finished bandaging Ilara, patting her shoulder like a daughter. "Rest now. The moon will guide the rest." But as Harlan rose to oversee the defenses, a faint tremor shook the stone. A scout's warning howled from Sophia, distant but urgent. More shadow claws, stragglers, probing the western flank, or worse, Victor's spies slipping through cracks. Harlan's golden eyes hardened, the bond thrumming with Ilara's quiet resolve beside him. The pack had won the skirmish, but the war simmered, the Shadow Mother's whispers growing on the wind. With 7 pups at stake and a mate's heart entwined, Harlan would fight not just for territory, but for a legacy that could unite the mountains or shatter them all. Hey, if you were Harlan, Would you chase alliances or fortify alone with that new bond fueling you? Tell me in the comments, what's your hunch on the Shadow Mother's true power over the pups? If this chapter's deepening the drama for you, hit like and subscribe for the alliance twists ahead. Where are you tuning in from, and how's the mate bond pulling at your heartstrings? Harlan's boots echoed through the winding tunnels as he emerged from the upper vents into the main chamber, the midday sun slanting through the cavern mouth like spears of light, piercing the mist-shrouded pines. The Sierra Madre's air hummed with tension, carrying the sharp resin of evergreens and the faint underlying musk of distant wolves, Shadow Claw's remnants testing the edges of his territory. Sophia's warning howl still lingered in his ears, a high-pitched trill that set his teeth on edge, but it was the pull in his chest that urged him forward. The mate bond, now a steady thrum linking him to Ilara, amplifying every beat of her heart like his own. He found Marco coordinating the perimeter sweep near the fire pit, the wiry beta's scarred cheek twitching as he barked orders to a cluster of young warriors. Jax loomed nearby, his stocky frame wiping blood from a claw mark on his arm, while Lena sharpened her knife on a whetstone, her sharp eyes flicking up at Harlan's approach. The den felt alive with purpose, furs strewn across the stone floor bearing the imprints of restless paws, and the scent of fresh-brewed sage tea from Rosa's earlier tray mingling with the earthy dampness of the mountain's breath. "Stragglers on the west flank," Harlan said, his voice a low command that cut through the murmurs. "Sophia's holding them off, but we can't afford leaks. Double the guards. Use the silver vines on the weak points." Marco nodded, snapping his fingers to rally two betas, a pair of siblings named Diego and Carla, Diego lanky and quick with a laugh that hid his nerves, Carla broader with a no-nonsense braid and a scar from a childhood fall. They shifted and bounded out, their forms blurring into the sunlight, but Harlan's mind wasn't fully on the borders. The bond tugged insistently, drawing him back to the alcove where Ilara tended the pups. He paused at the entrance, watching her from the shadows. She knelt on the soft furs, her torn dress mended further with strips of cloth from Tomas's satchel, her chestnut hair tied back to reveal the graceful line of her neck. The pups played a makeshift game, Rio tossing a pine cone to Mateo while the twins chased shadows cast by the quartz lanterns, their giggles a fragile melody against the den's stone silence. Mira sat cross-legged nearby, weaving wildflower stems into a crown, her green eyes thoughtful as she glanced at her mother. Ilara sensed him before she saw him, her head turning with a soft smile that lit her blue eyes. "The pull, it's stronger now," she said quietly, rising to meet him halfway. Her hand slipped into his naturally, the warmth chasing away the chill of doubt. Up close, the faint scent of comfrey from her bandages clung to her, mixed with the wild innocence of the pups. Like the moons finally aligned. Harlan squeezed her fingers, his golden eyes searching hers. The alpha in him had always stood alone, but this, her quiet strength, the way she anchored the chaos, filled voids he hadn't known existed. "It is, and it means we fight as one." He glanced at the pups, Leah toddling over to wrap her arms around his leg, her tiny face upturned with trust. The gesture melted something in him, a protective growl rumbling low. Rosa's words about the chants. Can you teach them? Strengthen the runes before Victor regroups. Ilara nodded, her expression turning serious as she called the children closer. The old songs from the valleys, passed from omega to omega. They bind blood to stone, heart to pack. As the pups gathered, even Mira setting aside her crown, Ilara began a soft melody, her voice weaving through the air like mist over the arroyos. The words were in the ancient tongue, lilting and rhythmic, and the pups joined in hesitantly at first, their high voices harmonizing. Harlan felt it immediately, a vibration in the cavern walls, the runes etched into the stone glowing faintly, as if the mountain itself responded. Rosa appeared at the alcove's edge, her white braids glinting, staff tapping softly. "Beautiful, Nina," The Shadow Mother's rites twist power, but this heals it. The Lawkeeper's eyes twinkled with approval, but her tone held warning. Victor's spies will sense the surge. We need eyes beyond our borders. Allies. The word echoed in Harlan's mind as he stepped away, pulling Ilara with him to the chamber's map. Unfurling it again, he traced lines to the coastal clans. The Saltfang pack, led by Old Thorn, a grizzled alpha with a salt-crusted mane and a grudge against Victor from a shared border raid years back. "I'll send Sophia and Diego," he decided, marking the route. "Thorn owes me for pulling his scouts from a rock slide last season. If we link packs, Victor's numbers won't matter." Ilara's hand on his arm steadied him, her touch a reminder of the stakes. "And the traitor? Gale's not alone." Nadia's words hinted at a network. Her blue eyes darkened, remembering the interrogations, the sly enforcer's tattooed smirk promising more shadows within. Before Harlan could respond, Thomas limped in, his milky eye unreadable but his good one urgent. "The prisoner's alpha, one's breaking, the lanky scout. Says Victor's got a ritual site in the eastern canyons, prepped for the full moon. Needs the Pups' essence to wake the Shadow Mother fully, turn her rage on all alphas, make him unchallenged king of the Sierra." Harlan's blood ran hot, the bond flaring with Ilara's shared fury. The Pups' song faltered behind them, Mira's voice trailing off as she overheard. "No," Ilara whispered, clutching Harlan's hand tighter. "We'll stop it." The decision crystallized. "Marco, ready a strike team. Me, you, Jax, Lena. We hit the site tonight, disrupt the preparations before they regroup." As the betas assembled, gear clinking, leather straps, silver-tipped daggers, pouches of ward herbs, the den buzzed with focused energy. Ilara pulled him aside, her lips brushing his ear in a moment of intimacy that sent heat through him. "Come back to us. The bond. It hurts without you." He cupped her face, thumb tracing her cheek. "I will. For you. For them." The kiss was brief but fierce, sealing the vow amid the Pups' watchful eyes. As dusk fell, painting the cavern in twilight hues, Harlan led the team out into the cooling forest. The Sierra Madre whispered secrets on the wind, rustling leaves, distant streams, but danger lurked in the shadows. Sophia's earlier probe had scattered the stragglers, but as they crested a ridge, an ambush erupted. 5 shadow-claws wolves bursting from the underbrush, eyes gleaming with feral hunger. The fight was brutal, claws raking fur, fangs sinking into flesh. Harlan tore through 2, his midnight form a blur, but a sharp pain lanced his side. A poisoned dart from a hidden archer, Victor's cunning twist. Vision blurring, he shifted back, roaring as Lena dragged him to cover. Marco and Jax held the line, but the attackers pressed, one shifting to human, a scarred female with Nadia's thorny tattoos, laughing as she knocked another dart. "The mother calls her due, Voss. Your bond won't save you." Ilara's pull sharpened in his chest, a distant ache mirroring his wound. The team retreated, bloodied but alive. The ritual site's location burned into memory from the scout's confession. Back at the den under cover of night, Thomas worked feverishly on the poison, his hands steady despite the healer's age. Ilara stayed by Harlan's side, her songs now a healing chant, the Pups' voices joining to knit his flesh. But as the full moon loomed in 2 nights, whispers reached them. Victor's forces massing, the traitor network deeper than thought. Rosa's own nephew among the suspects, his shifty patrols too convenient. The pack teetered on the edge, the bond their only light in the gathering dark. Hey, if you were Ilara, would you join the strike team despite the risk, or guard the den with the Pups' songs? Drop your thoughts in the comments. What's your prediction for the full moon ritual? If this chapter's ramping up the stakes for you, smash that like and subscribe for the epic finale. Where are you watching from, and how's the bond's pull hitting you? The full moon rose like a silver sentinel over the Sierra Madre, its light bathing the jagged peaks in an ethereal glow that turned the pines into whispering sentinels. Harlan stood at the den's entrance. The poison's haze lifted from his veins, thanks to Thomas's relentless poultices and Ilara's haunting chants, but the ache in his side lingered as a dull reminder of the ambush. His midnight fur rippled as he shifted partially, golden eyes scanning the mist-choked canyons where Victor's forces massed. A horde of shadowy wolves, their howls a cacophony of greed and dark promise. The air thrummed with the scent of impending rain and ritual smoke, acrid and ancient, drifting from the eastern site the scout had betrayed. Inside the cavern, Ilara paced the main chamber, her hand pressed to her chest where the mate bond pulsed like a second heartbeat. The pups huddled near the fire pit, their small faces illuminated by dancing flames, Rio clutching a carved wooden wolf Jax had whittled for him, the twins Luca and Leah whispering secrets to each other, Matteo dozing against Mira's side. Mira, ever the sentinel, sharpened a small stick into a pretend dagger, her green eyes fierce. "Mama, the songs! Will they stop the bad moon?" she asked, voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. Ilara knelt, drawing them into a circle, her chestnut hair loose and glowing like burnished copper in the firelight. "They will, mi amor. Our voices are the light that chases shadows." Rosa sat nearby, her white braids coiled like serpents, staff across her lap as she murmured approvals. The lawkeeper's nephew, the suspected second traitor, young Elias with his sly smile and wandering patrols, had been confined hours ago, his confessions spilling like weak poison under Lena's interrogation. "Victor's coin bought more than maps," he'd whimpered, eyes darting like a cornered fox. "The rights, they promised power to all who served." Harlan had spared him the caves, binding him instead to prove loyalty in the coming fight. But trust was a fragile thread now. The strike team assembled at Harlan's signal, Marco's wiry form coiled with anticipation, his scarred cheek a map of old loyalties, Jax's stocky bulk hefting a satchel of silver wards, Lena, knife gleaming, her ponytail tied back for battle, and Sophia, her white blaze stark against tawny fur, nose twitching for scents. Diego and Carla flanked them, the siblings' energy a spark of youthful fire. "For the pack," Harlan growled, his voice resonating through the pack link, a vow that echoed to Ilara's core. She met his gaze across the chamber, the bond flaring hot, love fierce and unyielding, forged in blood and moonlight. As they slipped into the night, the forest came alive with the Sierra Madre's secrets, streams gurgling over mossy rocks, owls hooting warnings, the wind carrying the distant chant of Victor's ritualists. The eastern canyons opened like a maw, ringed by jagged boulders, etched with profane runes that pulsed red under the moon. At the center, a stone altar loomed, slick with oils and surrounded by 24 shadow-claws wolves, their forms shifting restlessly. Victor presided, a hulking brute with coal-black fur and eyes like smoldering embers, his mane tangled with bones and thorns. Beside him, Nadia knelt, her tattooed arms bound but her smirk unbroken, whispering incantations that stirred the air into a vortex. Harlan's team struck from the shadows, a coordinated fury. Sophia darted first, her quick form slicing through the outer guards, claws raking flanks as she yipped signals. Jax barreled into the fray, his weight toppling 2 wolves into the canyon's edge, while Marco and Lena flanked, daggers flashing to sever runes with silver precision. Harlan charged the heart, his massive frame a midnight storm, jaws clamping on a ritualist's throat before Victor could react. The alpha brute whirled, roaring a challenge that shook the stones, his form rippling larger under the moon's pull, empowered already by half the right. "You dare?" Victor snarled, shifting to human mid-leap, a towering figure scarred and snarling, clad in ragged hides. His claws extended like obsidian blades as he lunged, slamming Harlan against a boulder. Pain exploded in Harlan's wounded side, but the bond surged, Ilara's strength flowing through him like liquid fire, her chance from the den amplifying his resolve. He countered with a brutal uppercut, fist connecting with Victor's jaw, sending the brute staggering. "These lands are mine now," Harlan spat, golden eyes blazing. "Your shadows end here." The battle raged, fur flying and blood soaking the earth, the moon witnessing a symphony of snarls and clashes. Nadia broke free in the chaos, scrambling toward the altar where a crude effigy of the Shadow Mother, a twisted idol of bone and obsidian, hummed with dark energy. But Elias, redeemed or desperate, burst from the underbrush at Harlan's earlier command, tackling her with a traitor's fury. "No more!" he yelled, his shifty eyes now alight with atonement as Lena bound her anew. Victor pressed Harlan relentlessly, his blows fueled by ritual frenzy, but the Alpha's greed blinded him. As the moon peaked, Ilara's voice pierced the night, carried on the bond, joined by the Pups' innocent harmony from afar. The runes flickered, the altar cracking as light Omega magic countered the shadows. Victor faltered, clutching his chest. The whelps, their power. Harlan seized the moment, shifting fully and driving his fangs into the brute's shoulder, tearing with primal force. Victor howled, collapsing as his pack broke, scattering into the canyons like defeated ghosts. Dawn broke as Harlan limped back to the den, the team bloodied but victorious, Nadia and Victor captured, the ritual site razed, the Shadow Mother's whispers silenced. The Sierra Madre sighed in relief, birdsong filling the air as mist burned away. Ilara waited at the entrance, Pups tumbling out to greet them, their small arms wrapping around legs and waists. Mira hugged Harlan first, her crown of wildflowers pressed to his chest. "You did it," she whispered, and he ruffled her hair, the Alpha's heart swelling. In the chamber's warmth, with Thomas tending wounds and Rosa intoning blessings, Harlan pulled Ilara close, the bond sealing fully under the fading moonlight filtering through cracks. "The pack's changed," he murmured against her hair, the 7 pups weaving around them like threads in a new tapestry. Stronger, whole. Omegas integrated, alliances forged with the salt fangs on the horizon, betrayals purged. The Lupus pack rose anew, a family bound by more than blood. Years later, under that same moon, the den echoed with laughter, the pups grown into warriors and healers, their blood moon gifts a light, not a curse. Harlan and Ilara stood together, watching the Sierra Madre's stars, their legacy etched in the mountains forever. Hey, what a ride! Did the Bond and Pups songs deliver the epic win you hoped for? Would you have trusted Elias's redemption or locked him away for good? Share in the comments, and if this finale changed everything for you like it did the pack, smash that like and subscribe for more heart-pounding tales. Where are you from, friend, and what's your favorite twist in the story?